Hey, good morning. I'm Patricia Murphy. It's Monday. This is Seattle Now. With the 1 and 2 lines connected across Lake Washington, Sound Transit is looking to its next major projects. Trains to West Seattle, Ballard, and Tacoma have all been approved by voters, but it's not all smooth sailing. We'll get into what we know about West Seattle's light rail journey in a minute. But first, let's get you caught up. Seattle Mayor Katie Wilson says the city needs to grow taller, denser, and faster to address the housing crisis. She's proposed speeding up Seattle's growth plan to build more housing near transit and neighborhood centers. Meanwhile, there are 2 public hearings today where you can weigh in on the next phase of the comprehensive plan. This morning's meeting at 9:30 is virtual. This afternoon's at 3 is in person. Traffic fatalities in Washington state are finally going down. The Seattle Times reports they declined 12% in 2025 compared to the year before. That comes after several years of increasing traffic deaths, hitting a 3-decade high in 2023. Officials with the State Traffic Safety Commission told the Times the downward trend reflects a return to pre-pandemic driving behavior. During the pandemic, alcohol use increased, and there was a nationwide uptick in speeding, reckless driving, and other unsafe behavior. And heads up, friends in Tacoma, Sound Transit's T-Line service will be suspended beginning at 6 tonight until Thursday. Buses will replace trains across the entire 4-mile stretch, arriving on the normal T-Line schedule. Sound Transit crews are replacing a broken rail. We'll be back with more headlines on tonight's episode of Seattle Now. Sound Transit doesn't have enough money to tackle its plans to expand the regional light rail system. It's almost $35 billion short. That will likely affect efforts to get the light rail to Ballard, Tacoma, and West Seattle. Still, last week, King County Councilmember Tracy and Sound Transit reps promised light rail service would be coming to West Seattle, just maybe not how it was originally envisioned. That left people at last week's West Seattle Light Rail Forum with some questions and concerns.
I know this is challenging, but I'm just thinking 20, 30, 40 years down the line, we got to get this done.
Displacement is major concern from so many conversations I had in the community.
A lot of us who have other options prefer light rail. When can we expect this decision from the Sound Transit Board so we can go ahead and get started with this?
West Seattle blog editor Tracy has been following the twists and turns of light rail service to West Seattle since the first whispers more than a decade ago. She's here now to talk about it. Tracy, thanks so much for taking the time.
Sure.
So what is the status of this project right now?
Basically, they're at a point where as Sound Transit works on its cost-saving measures, they're ramping up for a decision sometime within the next few months, likely, by the board, whether to go ahead with this or not. West Seattle is in the spotlight because, as several leaders have reiterated recently, it's, quote, shovel ready, which means that work could actually start really quickly thereafter if a decision was made. But they really have to commit to spending the money that it would take to get the final design and the construction going. Right now, the timeline is really kind of soft. Tracy is hoping for May. Sound Transit's hoping for the end of June. We'll see what happens in the next couple months.
I'm really glad you used the term shovel ready because I'm curious, beyond the obvious, the project's ready to go. What are they trying to say to people with that message?
What they're trying to say is that if the board gives its say-so, they can go ahead and send contracts out for bids. They can start hiring people. That's really important. Local union leaders spoke at a community forum that was held the other night. One of the community questions was, what exactly does shovel ready mean? And in this particular case, they made it clear that it didn't mean that they were going to show up and start tearing up streets immediately and digging tunnels and things, but that they would be able to do some work that was already just standing by waiting, do some testing, other things like that.
That's important context. The vision of light rail to West Seattle has changed a lot over the years. Let's enlighten listeners who may not have been along for this ride, Tracy. What are we looking at now?
What we're looking at now is it would start from Soto, basically, and there would be another Soto area where people would board and would catch trains and so forth or get off. But the part that West Seattleites are paying the most attention to is from Soto, crossing the Duwamish River on another bridge. And that's really important. If they can't put light rail on the West Seattle Bridge, they would have to build a completely different bridge just to the south of this bridge. Once it got over here, there would be a station at Delridge. And then there was supposed to be a station at Avalon, but by all accounts, pretty much that station is out. Then light rail would continue in a tunnel to the West Seattle Junction, which is what we call downtown West Seattle. It's the heart of commerce around here, and also of very dense and increasingly densifying development and homes.
Okay, that is the latest proposal. Some people got left out there. It was standing room only at a recent community meeting. Who was in the room and what was the sentiment?
The room was people that had been involved most recently and also long ago. There was a group of local folks led by the West Seattle Urbanists Club. They printed out T-shirts. They had signs about Save West Seattle Light Rail. And then there was a large contingent of people who probably, were just there because they're interested in what's happening.
I'm glad you brought up that people showed up with alternative proposals. What were they talking about?
They have proposed alternately that some of the money be spent on more buses. Their point is that we already have bus service from West Seattle to downtown. Why not just take these billions of dollars and make vastly more capacity, faster schedules? Also, they have in the past proposed a gondola, an aerial tram that would go from West Seattle to downtown. And there was a person supporting that who, did a lot of work. They even had a name for it called Skylink at one point.
I remember this, Tracy.
Yeah.
I went to a press conference for this. They made a big deal about it.
Yeah, there's been several things over the years. And then the proponents of these alternatives would, sort of realize when it wasn't getting a whole lot of traction and they'd move on. But in the end, the underpinning is always the same thing, which is that this is ridiculously costly, both in terms of money and in terms of the amount of homes and businesses that will be swept away, even though that number has been dramatically cut in the most recent Sound Transit proposals.
What has changed for Sound Transit, and how much will this new plan save?
They're taking pains to say that it will save up to $2.6 billion, but that's off a price tag that, if I'm correct in the most recent figures, was up to $7 billion for the line, when this is, several times what was originally discussed when ST3 went before voters back in 2016.
Yes, let's remind listeners of that original vision while we're here that people voted on in 2016.
And keep in mind, again, that ST3 is not just West Seattle. It also includes Ballard. It also includes a rapid transit bus system. It was a really wide-ranging plan. And it included the 3 stops to West Seattle, of which the Avalon station that's probably going to get thrown out was one of them. But way back then, I don't recall the exact cost, but it was definitely, a fraction of what they're talking about that they need now. And, Sound Transit's contention is that inflation has gone up, costs have gone up, everything has changed, pandemic changed, ridership changed. Nonetheless, they've kind of got this commitment on paper and are trying to figure out how to deal with it.
Back in 2016, voters were asked to approve a tax increase to fund public transportation in the region called ST3. What do people in West Seattle in particular feel that Sound Transit owes them?
Light rail, period, one way or another, especially to the junction. One thing that they could do is just cross the Duwamish and stop for now at Delridge and at some point, extend it to the junction. And the whole point that, that many people made is, no, that's ridiculous. The junction is where there's so many people living, there's so many businesses. You have to get to the junction even if you cut out this Avalon stop in the meantime.
Light rail, especially if it goes to the junction, would really change things for West Seattle.
To some degree. Again, people are, pointing out now we've had the Rapid Ride C line for more than a decade, and that's gotten people directly downtown. Things would look different because we'd have a station to a light rail go in this station, go down about 30 feet, catch your train, go downtown. And that would mean that there would be some new development on top of it. There'd be, more housing. Much of the West Seattle Junction is already zoned for far denser than it's become.
Tracy, in order to execute this current plan, what's going to have to move? What kinds of businesses or homes might be displaced?
At the moment, they've worked in this alternative to cut down the number. I think there's more than 100 different displacements. A neighborhood of homes here and there. There's some folks over by the Delridge alignment. And then the businesses, the ones that things have really focused on, is this one particular group of businesses that's beside the future Delridge station. And the Delridge station hasn't really changed much through all these iterations. And right now, on this one particular stretch of Delridge Way, there's a music lesson establishment, Mode Music Studios, and their nonprofit arm. There's also a beloved venue that has live music and food, the Skylark Cafe and Club. And then there's the Ounces Beer Garden and Tap Room, the Alki Beach Academy, a very large daycare and preschool. And these are all kind of clustered in the area where the Delridge station is going to go. So they've been the ones that there's been a lot of focus on. How are they going to find some place to go?
As we've been talking about, West Seattle is not the only neighborhood affected by this. Ballard and the city of Tacoma are also waiting in line for their projects here. I'm curious, though, what the delays and changes say about the perception of West Seattle as part of the city.
There haven't actually been that many delays yet. I was looking back at some of our archived coverage of the early going. And just before ST3 got on the ballot, there was talk that light rail would go to West Seattle by 2033. And then there was a big deal made that said, oh boy, we can do this to 2030. And then it got pushed back again to 2032. So unlike Ballard, which has seen a dramatic change in the promises made for that area, West Seattle, at least on paper, again, until something actually gets, formally decided, spent, construction begins, it's still kind of what they were talking about, way back in 2015, 2016.
You've followed this story, Tracy, since the beginning. What are you expecting? What are you watching for?
That's a really tough one because when you watch the board, one of the things that they're really, intent on is what they call the spine, is that, they have to get to Tacoma, they have to get to Everett. That's been promised for 60 million years. And here's this little West Seattle stub. And yet, especially since they happen to have, the biggest cheerleader for West Seattle Light Rail, Dow Constantine, as the CEO now, certainly he alone cannot pull X billion dollars out of his back pocket. But I don't think that they're going to be dropping West Seattle if there's, anything he has to say about it. And as the CEO, pretty much does have a lot to say about it.
Yeah. You think there's real power in Dow being CEO at this point?
It's just a very loud voice.
Interesting. Really interesting. West Seattle blog editor Tracy Record, really appreciate you taking the time. Thanks for your coverage.
Thank you.
Appreciate you listening to Seattle Now, and thanks to our generous donors for making this show possible. Why not take a moment to rate and review Seattle Now in your favorite podcast app? Today's episode was produced by Brooklyn Jamerson Flowers. It was edited by Caroline Chamberlain Gomez. Our production team also includes Andy Hurst, Vaughn Jones, and Paige Browning. Greg Kramer does our theme music. Seattle Now and KUOW Public Radio are members of the NPR network. I'm Patricia Murphy. See you tonight for Evening Headlines.